to della Espada now, which I discovered in New York about what, 25 years ago, 20 years ago. I've been obsessed ever since. And so I'm very excited that today we have Luis de Oliveira joining us. He's the co-founder of Della Espada, which has been around already for 30 years. And they have a factory near Mira in Portugal, which is solar powered. So how many luxury furniture brands are there that have fully solar powered factories? So I'm very excited to meet you and to hear your talk today. So thank you for joining us, Luis.
Thank you, Philip. I hope you guys can all hear me. Give me a thumbs up. That's great. It's well, I'll start with my thank yous and I'll put up my presentation. I'll start my timer to make sure I don't talk more than my allotted time. But thank you to Armando and Kavita for, I think, bringing us all together. Thank you, Philip and Lee, for hosting today. So let's get the timer and let's get that presentation going. We're off. Today's talk has involved people in design and people working at a very personal, almost a one-to-one scale. And I'm going to approach today's conversation from a different angle, where a slightly larger enterprise or project still can maintain a very valid dialogue with the world of craft. And I think this is the moment where most people roll their eyes and say, well, it's not going to work. But I'm going to ask you, bear with me. I've been given 20 minutes to prove this point, and I'm going to be assisted by 80 different pictures. So sometimes this is going to feel like a speed date, and I'll try to go through them as fast as I can. If I won't be putting up words and text, I do like technical presentations. I love them to bit. I was very jealous of Rose's presentation full of charts and very useful information, but today this is all visual. If you want to find out names and other things, then just go to our website and you'll probably find everything there. Let's see where I can start. This is a 30-year story. It's also a boy meets girl story. I met my wife in college and we both didn't want to be engineers. So we went out and found an alternative way to earn a living. We're not trained in design. I think it's equally valid to be self-trained in design. We weren't even from the creative industries, I guess. But very, very quickly in our early years after college, we found ourselves running a tiny woodworking business. That was tiny for a good 10 years, long enough for most people to quit. But then I found myself going down a country lane in Portugal to see what was a factory that was destined to close. And the owner was keen to get rid of it. They were making furniture, which is what I make today, what I was making 30 years ago. They were making furniture, and we did a deal for not too much money, thankfully. We roped in, as usual, friends and family to kind of buy that business. Now, 20 years later, I wouldn't dare call it a factory. I do call it a workshop, and I'm going to try to prove why. But just to get our head around scale, we're just under 100 people, so that's a lot of people this day and age in the kind of world that I live in. We make about 5,000 different things under that roof, which is again not to be laughed at when I sit there and look at it all. And when I look at design projects over the 30 years, we've worked on 300 different design projects. That sounds like 10 a year. It wasn't exactly that way, but it's a nice way of looking at it. And incidentally, Mira is a small town on the Portuguese coast. It's about an hour south of Porto, which is where I was born, and 2 hours north of Lisbon. So warm greetings from all my colleagues in Portugal. I put this presentation all by myself, so it's probably the reason why I haven't been able to edit the 80 images down to something less, but I found this image, which is recent, and it tells you exactly what we do. We cover all the main pieces of furniture for the home, and there's a good balance between upholstered furniture and wood furniture, which is what many people know us for. In fact, this photograph probably is the way people think of us when they look at us from perhaps New York, Philip, when you first met us. I have a design here which goes back to 2009. It was designed, it's a table designed by Ilse Crawford. And right next to it is a cabinet which was designed this year and designed by the in-house studio. We've had an in-house tradition that goes back all the 30 years of our existence. And I like the fact that we're showing this, we showed this June in a pop-up event, and that's how we sell. We sell through galleries and partners around the world. And in this pop-up event, you can see something that is 15 years in terms of age, in terms of when it was designed, but right next to something that's brand new. Just an example of the kind of products and spaces that we exhibit in. Right, so I've got it now. So far, this sounds pretty much like any other slightly larger business in the world of design. There's quite a few of them in Italy and Spain, less so in Portugal. But where I think we begin to move away from their path is when you look at this. This is, you can kind of glimpse down the main kind of building of our workshop. And what you're seeing essentially is a plank made from wood. It's essentially a sliced tree. And when I look at wooden furniture and I look at wood, I think I'm reminded that trees are time-space recorders. They record the passage of time and they record where they are, the climate around them. And so one of the amazing things of working with this material is that every single piece is incredibly individual, as you would imagine. And then if you're scratching your head and wondering how that roof powers the whole workshop, it has everything to do with our choice of material. If we were dealing with a material that required enormous amounts of energy to transform it into an object that is useful to you, no roof in the world could keep that going. And I think that's something that we need to all ponder, the energy content of the things that we use. Instead, I let the tree grow thanks to, I guess, sunshine. And then I slice it as if it was just a few slices of cheese. And then there's a few things that make this work profoundly human. The pieces of wood need to be chosen so that they're agreeable next to each other, and that's exactly what you see here. And then there's a long-standing tradition of how to lock these pieces together. I'll spare you the technical details of why that has to be done, but that's a world unto itself. Wood needs to be shaved, and I've deliberately picked a picture with someone using a chisel. But mind you, I'm not like, I guess, my historical friends in the arts and crafts movement, which used to be quite grumpy about machinery and equipment. I think it's important to use the best tools you can find, and we do use computer-controlled machines as well. And then, of course, every piece of furniture needs to be finished. And I think because of the diversity of shapes, being a creative business, we believe in diversity, not just having one thing for all people of the world. I think finishing has to be done by hand. I'm not going to ignore the other side of the business, which is the one that I actually can do with my own hands, as I taught myself how to upholster. Upholstery is an incredibly manual craft. Even vast factories use very, very basic equipment to build your upholstered pieces. There are always some exceptions to this, but here we are wrapping up a cushion using needle and thread. I think this speaks volumes, and the templates behind Joachim here are a reminder of how diverse the different things that are needed to, all the different parts of fabric that make up an upholstered piece. It's all about diversity rather than uniformity. Right, so I didn't know this picture existed until I went looking into our image library, and it was a surprise. And I said, well, what are they up to? They've raided the photo studio and taken pictures of themselves, but actually I think it's a lovely photograph. And it's a good excuse for me to tell you a little bit about how I feel industrial design and the world of craft are not incompatible. This is actually our in-house design team. They're all people with formal training, unlike, I guess, Luis and Fatima, my wife, in design. And it just gives you a sense of how important industrial design is to us. These are 9 people out of a total of 100. That's almost 10% of our payroll dedicated to this. Now, industrial design is often associated with volume production. In fact, for a long time, I think a lot of industrial designers thought that they weren't relevant to the world of craft. But I think that I believe that thinking is wrong. For me, industrial design is a structure for thinking, thought process. It relies on research and recording, it relies on testing, it relies on debate. And all these things are valuable when it comes to dealing with the historical crafts. It's valuable because they're disappearing, and so just recording and researching them is worthwhile. I am not saying that we're going to then deposit this knowledge in a museum. That would be actually a calamity. But I think that it all starts with this tradition of research and recording work. But the thinking behind design, industrial design, which involves a lot of testing and a lot of iteration, is similar to the historical traditions where people tested things over decades, if not hundreds of years, and settled on certain ways of working after that process. In a way, we're trying to accelerate that in our day-to-day as industrial designers. And so I feel that the union between industrial design, or at least the philosophy behind it, and the world of craft is incredibly important. And just as an aside, like many people during the pandemic, we had a moment to pause. And in 2020, my wife and I decided that we wanted to take a leap in terms of how we used the business that we had put in place, the business that Philip was kind enough to say something nice about, say that he saw us all the way in New York, and transform the way that we work with people who otherwise would be called suppliers. Now, we do make everything that is wood under our roof. We make everything that involves a textile under our roof. But like many, many other businesses of our type, we have quite a few suppliers. I'm pleased to say that almost all of them are local. It goes from people to supply stone, to metal parts, to glass. I can see terrazzo that comes from down the road, just 10 kilometers down the road. All these different parts have to be supplied to us. But in 2020, that time that we had to think about things made us led us to the conclusion that working with small workshops had to go beyond just, I want to buy this and thank you very much and here's the money. We felt that we could develop more meaningful relationships with tiny workshops who usually wouldn't work with a business like ours. And one of our first partners was Fabrical. This is a blanket maker in the Alentejo region in Reguengos de Monserrat. These people it's actually a historical business. It goes back to the 1930s. They work on manual looms and they make blankets. And you would imagine that they would never quite connect with the world of contemporary furniture. But we found a way by obviously doing exactly what we do as industrial designers, sending people to spend time and learn and observe and listen and watch, and also look at the rhythms of the business. This is precisely what Sam was emphasizing, that each business, particularly tiny workshops, have patterns of work and rhythms. And as a slightly larger company, if you come and say, I'm going to place an order for 100 people, for 100 things, the folks that are running that workshop might experience joy at the beginning, but after that they'll feel utter dread and panic because that order is the wrong order coming at the wrong time and probably will undermine the business that they already have in order to just please the larger business. So I think it was really important to learn how to work with these people. Here's another person you've heard about today. And by the way, if it looks like we all got together in the pub before this conference and decided to kind of pat each other on the back, I promise you that didn't happen, even though everyone seems to be sick. So it does look like this is a coordinated affair. The design and craft in Portugal goes way beyond all the people here, even though I'm very fond of all the panelists. But there is a sense of community in Portugal, which I think doesn't exist in a lot of other places. Perhaps that comes from not being a huge place, a huge country. You know, Porto is just 3 hours drive from Lisbon, and there's a lot of the country in between. But I think this community is very valuable, but please don't assume that we just work with each other, and it goes beyond that. But this is Toino Bell. It's a workshop run by our friend Nuno. He is a craftsman who's already kind of taken one step forwards by working with Junko and turning it into a product that, you know, connects to the world of fashion, the world of handbags. And I think just by doing that, it was like a paradigm shift for his business. It does mean, though, that he has work at some time of the year and no work other times of the year. We also approach someone which is going to make you smile. This is a saddle maker, and the art of saddle making is as ancient as, I guess, horses have been hanging around with people. And saddle making, of course, is a diminishing art. This is a tiny workshop, again, about an hour south of our own workshop. You can see its size, its scale here from this image. You can even see the mold that exists there for making saddles on the left-hand side. And here our friend is working, laying out a piece of leather on a frame of a chair that we make. Now, look on the left, there is the very same man you saw earlier. That is, oh goodness, Joaquin, who leads our upholstery department. And we embedded a person from our design team in this business for almost a year to understand exactly how this is made. In fact, we've hired the owner of the business to come and offer training in our workshop so that we do the work that otherwise would collapse his workshop, but at the same time leave him with the areas of work that where only his skill is invaluable and irreplaceable. So that's actually a project I'm very, very proud of. Here's the end result. You can see the work that we've done in bringing blankets, including Rosa, you'll be pleased to know, very coarse, very thick wool, but very, very beautiful in its own way. Our use of soft rush, junco, and our use of leather, the traditions of molding leather with water that are incredibly ancient on our pieces. Now, I'm going to jump very quickly to Passo Futuro. I'm on 14 minutes. This is going badly, but I'm going to go pretty quickly through this because you guys have already heard a lot about it. I should mention that there are two founders of this organization, Fatima, who appears on the photograph on the top left, and also Astrid, who you'll see later on. Sadly, Fatima passed away 2 years ago. And so I think all of us who are fond of the project see this as a way of paying tribute to this very special person. And we're very, very proud of Astrid in wanting to continue with the project. Passa al futuro, pass on to the future. If you don't get it, you'll never get it. The whole objective here is about how to use diverse methods, diverse techniques to simply keeping this going, to pushing back against the tide that is going to sweep all this. What is it? It's the arts of rural Portugal, which are only 50 years away. I certainly remember in my grandparents' house, women coming to collect water from the fountain, and that's because they didn't have water at home. This rural world had its downsides. It was often poor and harsh, but at the same time, it had traditions which I think are at enormous risk of being lost. The workshops that we have supported, and I'm going to hit pause for a second. And whilst you can enjoy this really charming photograph of Sam and Nuno and their friend in the middle, we should give it a name. It looks almost like a creature of some sort. It has to do with how a business can support projects of this nature. You support it with money. Talk is cheap. But I think you can also support it in many other ways. One of them is answering the phone when Astrid calls. It's not easy to run a not-for-profit. And perhaps there's a thing that I can say, a word of encouragement. Another thing is to offer the resources that we have within our workshop in order to assist the project to move forward. It's not just, I'll give you something in kind or I'll give you cash. You really need to move on every possible front in order to support this kind of project. Now, what Astrid settled on here was a series of 5 workshops with 5 different designers to work with 5 different craftspeople, all within a very, very clear area of work, which is the wonderful world of basket weaving. And basket weaving was incredibly local, tied to materials that were just around the corner. In this case, it's soft rush. Here we have Christian Haas and Domingos working with cane in the south of Portugal. Here we have Joana Astolfi working with palm. She worked, actually, this is a beautiful story. She worked with Susanna, my apologies, Sonia, who was a weaver, but her daughter has actually gone into business and is a weaver herself, so she was integrated in that project as well. Then we have Enrique Rieta working with Isidoro, if I remember correctly. And then last but not all, here we have Tony struggling to get out of the willow bushes. And he found his way out and worked closely with Abilio Pereira. Now, another way that a business like ours can help this kind of projects is to help them reach a broader audience. And you might say, well, this sounds like cheap marketing, but you know what? It isn't. We have been so charmed and fallen so much in love with these different partners that we've decided to open a small gallery. Don't worry, nothing crazy, but a gallery that is dedicated to the intersection of design and art. Design and craft, my apologies. And we're very pleased to say that last week we offered an inaugural show. There isn't a single Espada piece of furniture for you to see here, unless you count those lovely wooden boards you see in this photography, and the base of Sam's lamp. But the point here is to really show this work. Why do it? Well, you know what? This is research for us. For us, as we try to bring techniques and absorb them in the projects that I mentioned before, we find it important to learn by watching, but it is also a way of communicating our values and telling people that there are things that we really care about that we find important. Right. As an aside, another project that we're associated with is Lisbon Design Week. It's very focused on local craftspeople. Keep an eye on that as well. I have exactly 1 minute to wrap up, so I'm going to appeal to the powers that be to give me at least 2 or 3 or 4 minutes to tell you about a very personal project. Thank you. Thank you so much, because I do have the timer. Shows that I'm not totally irresponsible. 25 years ago, I wrote a sentence because I used to be a chief copywriter and photographer for the business. Remember that tiny business a while ago? And I wrote a sentence which, for people from the mid-90s, might make sense. I said I liked John Paulson because I thought he was pretty cool. And I said as well that I liked William Morris because he was a hero. Most people that listen to that sentence would say that's nuts. How can a minimalist ever hang out with a truly a maximalist from the Victorian age? But you know, if I had more time, I would tell you why those two things are consistent. In fact, this image here shows the arts and crafts movement was about looking backwards, but it also involved cleaning up and paring down a lot of things that Morris was seeing in the industrial made products back then. They were actually too elaborate. And with the research that we did for this project, which was all about kind of doing justice to that sentence, walking the talk of that sentence, involved looking at historical details. There's a really charming story I'll tell you some of today about this lady here. We do know her name. She's Nellie Lovibond. And look at that cabinet on the right-hand side. We do know where it is, and we do know who made it, which is very charming. We took the historical details and we turned them into furniture. And, you know, I guess it's a sign of how dedicated we are to our own craft, that we can execute a piece like this. But we went the extra mile. And the extra mile is how businesses today can actually honor the spirit of the arts and crafts movement by bringing together many people under one roof. And it doesn't have to be your roof. The roof could be a project. We have a friend in London, Caterina Ricabona, is a textile artist. And so textile art is a wonderfully expressive medium. And we were very, very proud to have commissioned 2 pieces of work that are presented on this cabinet. So suddenly this piece is transformed from a piece of furniture into something, a container for art. But we went beyond that as well. We went even further, as you'll see here. The handles of that cabinet are in ceramics, and there's a tradition of ceramics in arts and crafts history that we felt we had to honor. But there's also this enormous diversity of glazes and colors and finishes and clays and firing temperatures. And you can imagine how those lovely people that I showed you, those 9 people in that photograph, how much fun they had researching and learning from Teresa Branco, a ceramicist in Porto. And then guess what? We're back to that meeting in the pub. Our friends from Floridist Design had a material which we thought had to be incorporated into this piece. They know a lovely lady called Maria, and Maria grows linen. Well, she grows the linen plants in the back of her flax in the back of her garden. She transforms it into thread. She weaves it into linen, all in her room. And then we need a little bit of outside help. So Valentina and Emma from Flora's textile design studio called on a friend. Her name is Isabel Ormier's tiny, tiny workshop. That's her workshop on the left. And she uses natural dyes to create not fabric, but something unique, something available in very, very small quantities. And I think something worth talking about. That's it. That's how Espada takes all these adventures and turns them into products that I guess, Philip, you can come and see. So thank you for listening to me. 23 minutes, didn't take too much of your time.
Thank you. No, you can take as much time as you like.
We're certainly going to come and visit you next year. We will be in Portugal.
Oh, you know what? I had some visitors this year who put a picture of me on Instagram and called me Willy. And I thought, that's not nice. And then in the next slide, they said, as in Willy Wonka's factory. And you know, I don't like the word factory, but in that particular instance, I was quite pleased. So do come and see us in our wonderful workshop.
We really agree on the William Morris thing. It's very much on our mind for already for a few years, and so I'm so happy to see that revival in your hands. And I truly believe that the philosophy of William Morris is going to be the philosophy of tomorrow. And so when you read his novel, News from Nowhere, you just know that this is where we are going in the future. So it's very inspiring. Thank you so much,
No,
really.
he certainly was a thinker, and he was a thinker of his time. And I
Mhm.
feel not everything translates into the 21st century, but the thrust of the philosophy is something that we need a lot in this day and
Essence
age.
of. Yeah. Mhm.
Thank
It's
you
been
for
a
coming.
pleasure to talk to you all.
Thank you.
Thank you. So we're going to move.